friends, this is Trish and welcome to Happy Holy Healthy Life. I want to talk about a difficult topic today, and that's the topic of Christian divorce. I got the idea for this video when I heard yesterday that Devon and Meagan had filed for divorce, and I really feel like I relate to them in a weird way because they were married basically a couple of weeks after I was, and so I'm kind of in that same time space that they are at. And on top of that, to be perfectly honest with you, this year has been super difficult for my marriage. And there's actually been times where I wondered if we were going to make it. And for a lot of people, that's shocking because I've made videos about when God writes your love story, and it just reminded me kind of their situation because they have, a book about waiting for God and having God write your love story in a sense. And it just can get really confusing for people because they wonder, okay, if God brought two people together, how could they be having these difficulties? How could they have a divorce? What could possibly happen? And that's actually what I want to talk about in today's video, because I've had some of the same questions myself, but actually walking through some really tough seasons has given me a lot of insight on what things can go wrong. And I think it's so important that the Christian community open up and be honest about some of these issues. It's super easy to judge and condemn and shame people, while at the same time keeping our own struggles a secret until they can't be kept a secret any longer. And so my hope in doing this video really has very little to do with trying to probe into that couple's particular situation, because I don't know what happened, but I wanted to use it as an opportunity to really talk about marriage difficulties. I think if more Christians did that, it would be really good for single people so that they can have a realistic picture of some of the challenges of marriage. And it would be helpful for people that are married and struggling, because I think especially in Christian communities, it is not very common to talk about marriage problems until the problems have advanced so much that the couple is already divorcing. I've actually wanted to talk about some of these issues for a long time, but a part of me felt really weird about it because I obviously don't want to discourage people about marriage, especially when I literally made videos that are encouraging people about God bringing them somebody to marry. But I think if we are open about sharing our testimonies and our victories and our miracles, it's just as important to be open about sharing our struggles and our defeats and our weaknesses, even if we open ourselves up to people judging us. Because that's honestly, I think, what we're all kind of afraid of. Because I think most of us have met the kind of Christians that say, if you just follow these 5 steps, then everything will be perfect in your life. And I think we all want those 5 steps to make everything perfect in our lives. But life is messy and marriage is messy. And so my aim here is just to be real, and I hope that it helps somebody. Because I know that there's been times where I've certainly gone looking for help and really didn't feel like I found it in the church or in Christian people. Although I've been blessed to have a few Christian people that have been super open and honest with me, and that has meant the world. So I want to be that open and honest person for you today. And of course, I would encourage you to be praying for Meagan and Devon. We never know, there could be a restoration in their situation. We just don't know. God is able to do anything. So from here on out, I want to tell you what I've learned about marriage in these last 9 years, and what have been some of the challenges that's made me wonder if I'd be able to stick things out. So I want to start out by talking about marriage expectations versus reality, which also feeds into the topic of marriage and romance idolatry. I know for me, from almost as long as I could remember, the number one thing that I wanted in life was to meet Prince Charming and get married. And I really kind of thought that that would be the answer to every problem that I ever had. I thought that it would bring me infinite bliss and eternal happiness. And it sounds kind of funny to say it that way, but if you think about our culture, think about Hollywood and the romantic comedies we watch and the fairy tales that little girls get fed with. And it sets us up to have these unrealistic expectations. But the crazy and unfair part about it all is it really does feel real. I'm sure we've all had the feeling of having a crush or falling in love, and there's butterflies and joy and ecstasy and passion and romance, and there's just this flood of positive emotions. So what we see in the movies seems to be confirmed by the reality of our feelings, because we're like, well, I know what it's felt like when I've fallen in love with somebody, so everything in the movies must be real. What they fail to mention is that whole falling in love sensation is kind of like a chemical bath in the brain that at best can last up to 2 years. But the hard reality is what goes up must come down. And I think that Many of us aren't really prepared for that in marriage. We've all heard of the honeymoon phase, and some people's honeymoon phase lasts a lot longer than others. But the truth is that marriage really is hard, and at least in my case, marriage didn't fix my problems, it magnified my problems. And the same with my husband. To be perfectly honest, marriage actually magnifies every problem that you and I have. If you've got unresolved trauma from your past, that's going to get triggered by marriage. If you have character problems that you've been kind of scooting under the rug, that's going to be magnified in marriage. If you have insecurities, that will be magnified in marriage. And so many of us go into marriage thinking that all of these problems will be solved when instead they get revealed in high definition for somebody else to see up close and daily. That's a little bit of a romance killer because the dating and romantic scene that a lot of people are able to take part in looks a lot different than everyday life. And that's not including when really difficult things happen, like tragedies, illnesses, job losses, and all of those things. In many ways, our kind of modern Western way of dating really plays into the fantasy because we're all putting forward our best faces and we're doing a really great job, or so we think, at concealing the darkness within. But the Bible says that we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And so even when both people are sincere Christians, we're all going to have areas of sin. And those areas of sin will bump up against our marriage partner. And to make matters more complicated, I'm sure we've all heard that opposites attract. So it may be that your sin patterns aren't complementary. So for example, you might have one spouse that their sin pattern leads them to give the silent treatment and stonewall and isolate and avoid, whereas the other spouse's sin pattern might be to cling and nag and follow, and you could just see how those cycles could create implosions. The truth is that marriage really is character boot camp. In marriage, we're so often confronted with selfishness, and since men and women are so different, we're having to learn to love the other spouse in ways that might feel foreign to us. On top of that, you're combining two people that have different backgrounds with different cultures, values, morals, family systems, and patterns, and you're suddenly merging all of those things overnight. And a lot of things that might generally seem uneventful, like how do you cook dinner and where do you eat it, and like things that seem really just like things you don't even think about when you're single, now can turn into a whole ordeal once you're married to somebody. Because suddenly they're looking at how you do things, and it most likely looks totally different than how they did them in their home growing up. And there can be a lot of hurt feelings with people judging and trying to change one another, and it can make for a really difficult first year of marriage. I think it's also important to note that there are some emptynesses, I don't know if that's a word, we'll call them holes or voids in our hearts that truly no human being can fill. But in all of the romantic movies and the fairy tales, we're sort of made to believe that we're half a person and somebody else out there is a half a person, and when you come together, you're going to be this whole person, that they're going to complete you, that they're going to fill in all of the missing gaps, but that's just not the case. So it's really easy to end up looking to the person that you marry to complete you, to bring you joy and meaning, and to fulfill all of the places that you felt were empty when you were single. And when that person inevitably can't do that, it's really tempting to think, oh, I must have just married the wrong person. Because again, if we're going off of that Hollywood model, and we're confirming that by the wild feelings of passion and romance that we know we've felt before for other people, once we're confronted with kind of the somewhat harsh reality of merging two sinners together under one roof, I think it's really normal to think, oh man, maybe I messed up. Maybe I did marry the wrong person. I think it's also important to note that marriage really magnifies differences in the same way that it magnifies our weaknesses. When you're dating and you're kind of in that in love phase, which scientists call limerence, it's really easy to gloss over differences. We've all heard the age-old kind of idea that what you thought was so cute and charming when you were dating turns into something that's obnoxious and annoying once you're married. So you might have, let's say, the type A personality guy that's kind of got the left brain engineer mind, who is really drawn to the free-spirited bohemian type B laid back girl. And they just think it's so enchanting and so romantic. And then they get married and they start trying to make plans and live out day to day. And they're discovering that this person thinks in such a way that's so foreign from me, I don't even know where they're coming from half the time. And there's, of course, more serious differences. There's a Bible verse that says, can two walk together lest they be agreed? I think that's in Amos 3:3. But when you have real differences, like let's say different political beliefs, different religious beliefs, different, again, morals and values, those things are going to clash hard. Because what tends to happen in marriage is there's a power struggle. In the process of becoming one, it has to be decided in some ways which values, which beliefs, which directions are going to stay and go when two people are heading in different directions. And the less that people are on the same page, the more continual friction there's going to be. This can be over issues like childbearing, careers, homemaking, and even how involved to be with one another's families. And depending upon what kind of Christian background you come from, there are different beliefs about the role of headship and submission and authority and women's roles and men's roles. And the opportunities for conflict and chaos are endless. I think a lot of people find too, once they get married, the things that sounded good in the marriage books and seminars don't feel as good trying to live them out. I think we definitely notice when we're dating certain differences, but the biggest mistake that we can make is believing that we will be able to change that person. And when we're in the in love, limerence, ushy-gushy phase, we are, whether we realize or not, kind of in a mode of self-deception where we're kind of trying to overlook red flags because we want this person to be the one so much. But once you're married, you're kind of looking at this person with your eyes completely open. And some people can experience what they call buyer's remorse in a way. It's like when you're in the store and something's under those soft lights, it just looks like the best purchase ever. But when you get it home and you realize how much money you spent and that there's a no refund policy, you kind of start looking and you're like, I don't know, maybe there's a scratch or like a dent. I don't know if I got the best deal. And that can definitely be a challenge in marriage. I think one of the most under talked about aspects of marriage is actually spiritual warfare, especially in Christian marriages. I really believe that Satan has a vested interest and his first target is on Christian marriages, period. And then I think there's a special added level of warfare for Christian marriages that are in any kind of spotlight. So whether it's that, you're the Sunday school teacher at your church or the pastor of a church, all the way up to high profile couples like Meagan and Devon, Satan wants to tear down those marriages more than anything. So there's a lot more spiritual warfare and pressure coming against them. I think it's also really important to note that oftentimes in the Christian community, we're taught about the importance of just marrying another Christian. We don't always necessarily think about how close that person's walk with God is. Marriage is so much like running a race. And it gets really hard if you feel like you're running at a steady pace, but your partner keeps kind of stopping, sitting in the grass, playing with the flowers, and you feel like you've got to go backwards to kind of get your spouse and bring them on board and keep up that pace with you, or vice versa. If you feel like you married a spouse that, they're light years ahead of you in your spirituality, and you feel like you're just trying to tell the difference between an epistle and apostle, and your spouse is over here at 3:30 a.m. praying down the heavens and memorizing books of the Bible, it would be really easy to feel kind of intimidated and left behind. And there can even be kind of spiritual competitions between spouses where one spouse makes the other one feel spiritually inferior. Especially if you're coming from like different denominations, there can be like a lot of judgment and tension there. I know that was definitely the case in the early years of my husband and I's marriage because he came from a traditional mainline denomination and I came from like a more Pentecostal, non-denominational flow. So I think in many ways, we both sort of a little bit looked down on each other's expression of Christianity. So maybe if I was listening to like a sermon, maybe he might have a little comment about it. Or, if I was going to his, like mainline denominational church, I don't know if it's rude for me to say the denomination, but I might make comments like, this is so dry. This is like totally lacking the Holy Spirit. And there was just kind of like a lot of tension there in the beginning. And thank goodness, eventually, we got on the same page and like, same denomination, same church, all of that stuff. But in the beginning, that was a real battle and definitely something to think about. I think another tricky reality about marriage is that people grow and change so much. So in many ways, it's like you've got to keep signing up to love the current version of your spouse. Obviously, sometimes those can be like physical changes, like getting older, gaining weight, those kind of things. But there can also be subtle or not so subtle personality changes, some belief changes, some worldview changes that just happen over time as a result of learning and life experience and knowledge. And people aren't always ready for that. It's kind of funny because there's a little saying that says that men marry women hoping that they never change, and women marry men hoping that they will change them. I think the tricky part about getting to like kind of the decade mark of marriage is that if there was something you were hoping would change about your spouse, or you were hoping to change about their spouse, and it hasn't changed yet, there can be sort of a hopelessness that sets in, and a wondering if I can live with this particular challenge for the rest of my life until Jesus comes back. And many couples decide that no, there are, as it's called these days, irreconcilable differences, that the two people are going in such different directions or have such different beliefs or have something about their personalities or beliefs that are so incompatible that they literally feel like they cannot dwell together in unity. And again, that goes back to the Bible verse, can two walk together lest they are agreed? I do think a tough thing about the way Hollywood and maybe America kind of encourages people to date into and get into relationships is a lot of times it's done for some of the wrong reasons. Stereotypically, a lot of times men will want to marry a woman because she's beautiful. Maybe they feel like they're getting a certain status from being with a woman that looks like whatever this person looks like. But sometimes women marry men for maybe like a lifestyle that they think they're going to have, or maybe there's a certain profession that they believe that their husband is going into. And they're like, yes, I want to be a doctor's wife or a pastor's wife or a lawyer's wife or a farmer's wife, whatever the occupation or vocation might be. And those are actually wrong reasons to marry somebody because, obviously in the case of women, women's looks change over time. No matter how much Botox, you can't stay looking 24 forever. And in the case of women marrying men for like an occupation or a lifestyle, they may end up deciding that they don't want to be in that occupation or have that lifestyle. And then it comes down to the real question, which is, do you love that person for truly who they are? Does the man love the woman for who she is on the inside and not just the outside? Does the woman love the man for who he is on the inside and not just the life or direction or path that she's hoping to take in her own life? These are all tricky things. As I mentioned before, I think that there is an added degree of pressure if you are in any kind of Christian community or ministry or spotlight. For one, a lot of people feel like if they confess to having marriage problems, that they are somehow going to make God look bad. Or they're worried that they're going to discourage people from marriage because the world already tends to have a fairly low view of marriage. And so a lot of Christians think if we confess how hard it is, then we're going to kind of scare people away from it and encourage people to just live the like modern, serial dating, serial marriage lifestyle. And many people believe that they will be seen as having a lack of credibility about what they're teaching if they wonder if it's working in their own life. And of course, a lot of people want to avoid the shame and judgment that often comes with confessing marriage challenges to others. So those are just some of the reasons why Christian marriages end. And I think we do need a ton of help within the Christian community about marriage. It's been said that the Christian divorce rate is just about as high as the non-Christian divorce rate. So that shows that a lot of people are struggling, but they don't know where to go and they don't feel like they have tools to be able to navigate those problems. Today, this was just a general overview, but I would be happy to make more in-depth videos if anybody has any questions or if you want to share your own stories or experiences. I would hope that this would be a safe place to do that. And again, let's be praying for each other. Pray for, people in ministry, like your pastors, marriage, for public figures, for your own marriages, for your friends' marriages, because Satan really is coming against them. And a lot of people do end up feeling truly hopeless about their situation. If you're new to this channel, I would love it if you would like and subscribe. And let me know if you have any video ideas for the future. Thanks for watching. God bless you guys and have a great day.